Hey, so welcome to Dr. Professor Mom.
Professor Mom. All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yes, this is your first time tuning into the YouTube channel. This is a channel that I created as a professor and a mom. And I really like to talk about the things that really affect not necessarily just professors, but really career driven people as they try to find balance between parenthood and their professions. And so today I have Jack Kelly here, who I met through his wife, Amina. And how this conversation kind of came, we were at one of our friends' son's birthday party, and we really just started talking about balancing ambition and parenthood. And it was a really nice conversation for me because when I think about the balance of ambition and parenthood, I tend to think about the woman. And I never really thought about what does that look like for the father or the man, and how are they dealing with the postpartum phase and kind of finding their footing, or getting back into their career, and like how do we redefine success? I don't like to use the terms redefine success because I think if you have goals, those are just your goals, and you don't have to redefine them to be a parent and to be ambitious in your career. So, Jack, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do? Because I find it, I mean, I'm an engineer. Engineering is kind of boring. So I find what you do to be really exciting. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, thanks for having me. It's exciting to kind of get to yap on a more professional level and talk about what I do a little bit more. So, I'm an artist, I'm a designer, professional creative, your friendly neighborhood art dad. I've kind of been calling myself lately. And so, my primary focus now, after about 8 to 10 years of kind of just trying out all these different things, is with my business, Ajax Anvil Company, is really helping working with businesses to help kind of identify what makes them special and how to kind of tap into what inspires them and what made them want to start their business and all of these kind of things, and how do we work together to kind of like uncover those gems of what inspires them,
Mm.
and how do we take that, and then in a, like a tangible way, I focus on branding, merch, and murals. And so how do we utilize creative assets and visuals to set yourself apart and create something that's truly authentic to your business and your all of these different things to set yourself apart from a very saturated market most of the time. um, so yeah, that's kind of like the short and sweet uh, bit, I guess.
Well, how did you get into that? Like, how did you get started in that career?
So I think this kind of ties into a lot of different things. Like, I was always into art. I was always kind of a creative kid. My dad was a painter. And growing up, my mom didn't really want me to follow in the footsteps of my dad. She wanted me to have something a little more financially stable. And she really kind of pushed for a long time. She's like, "Oh, well, it's like you really like Legos and like building, so why don't you do something like architecture?" And like my dad sat me down one day in high school and he was just like, "Absolutely the F not. You're gonna be stuck building Drees homes and you're gonna hate it." And you know, and we have a lot more of that kind of like later on that I we can touch on. But um in high school, I did music and everything, kind of like did other aspects of creativity. And because again, it's like they kind of like were pushing other elements. I almost went to Capital for music,
Oh, okay.
surprisingly. Yeah. So it's like I auditioned for Capital on tuba and almost had a very different career path.
Mm.
And I auditioned and I got into Capital, but I didn't get into the conservatory at the time. And the tuba head of the tuba department or whatever, he was just like, "Hey, we're kind of flush on tubas right now. You can re-audition in the fall." And I was just like, "No, f that. We're done. Over it. No, thank you."
Right.
Um, and so from there, it's like I was at a branch campus of Ohio State. I was kind of taking art and design classes, and with the intention of transferring into the visual communications program.
Okay.
And at the time, it was really competitive. They only took 18 students per major,
Mm.
which was like insane. They had this huge entry portfolio thing that you had to go through. Spent all this time on it, didn't get in. I was so mad. I like
Mm.
literally like punched a hole in the wall in my apartment, like raged out little Kyle, 18-year-old,
Yeah.
and only time that's ever happened, super embarrassing. And my professor at OSU Newark, he was just like, "Hey, look, man, like after getting to know you the last couple semesters, like I really think you should look into CCAD, Columbus College of Art and Design. They've got this illustration program." And it was like, "Oh wow, like that's something that you can do."
Mm.
Like, and because like for me, it's like I was always really inspired by like band T-shirts and movie posters and stuff like that. And like that's kind of where like I wanted to do, and I always thought that was super cool. Um, I was like, my mom's never gonna go for it. There's no way. Whatever,
Mm.
life's over,
Right, right.
And I called my mom upset, like I didn't get in, yada yada, and she was like, okay, well, you know, I was looking around. Have you thought about CCAD? If that's what you want to do, like we'll support you, we'll make it happen. And that was kind of like best thing that could have happened for me.
Mm.
Um, from there, kind of like moving forward, was in the illustration department, and it was awesome because like I always loved to draw, and it's kind of like the perfect combination of um, fine art and commercial art.
Yeah.
Because it's like before, it's like going in, like growing up, it was always just graphic design or fine art, and there was no middle ground. And it's
Mhm.
like you either sell out and you're making advertisements, or you're stuck in a studio being poor until you die, and then you get
Right.
rich and but you're dead.
Yeah.
And so from there, it was really great because it opened my eyes to all of these other opportunities. And like senior year, I was taking this class called Self Promotion for Illustrators, and that was really eye opening for me because it you do a lot of research to see like what are you interested in, what are these different industries like, and on the first day, rolling back to the like introduction to illustration, like freshman year, the professor was just like, you can walk into the mall, go to any store and get a job. Like any like with illustration, you build these skill sets, that are it's a toolkit, you
Right.
know, and how do you tell a story? How do you help solve? It's creative problem solving,
Mm.
and so, like, by the time senior year rolled around, um, I thought murals were really cool. I really loved package design, like beer cans, beer label, all that kind of stuff. I was always into T-shirts,
That's
posters,
cool. Yeah.
all of that. And part of one of my capstone projects, funny enough, I was thinking about this recently, was we did this group project and we came up with this like retro, kind of like retro futurism, uh, like vegan diner concept. And as part of that, we designed posters, we designed a mural, we designed merch, we did the logo, like all this different stuff. Flash forward 10 years, it's like that's what I'm doing now, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
And so I'm really fortunate in that way. And like over the last few years, and like since graduating, there's been a number of these moments where, um, like sorry, I gotta like catch my breath here.
It's
I'm just
okay.
like mile a minute. Um, but so upon graduating, or like with that class, it was like, what kind of things do you want to like? What are your dreams? What are your goals?
Yeah.
And one of those big exercises that we did was like, if you could do anything, like money's not an issue, time's not an issue, like nothing, like if you could just do anything, pie in the sky, big ideas, just crazy things,
Yeah.
write that out. And then how do you break that down into small bite-sized pieces? How do you go from like the 10-year, 20-year version to like the 10 to the 5, the 3, the
Right.
2, the 1, the 6 month, 3 months,
Yeah.
a week, And for me, that was huge. And coming back, when we moved back here right before my daughter was born, I was at the point where I was just like, I've checked all these things off my list,
Mm.
and a big part of that is just being able to plant those seeds. I've been talking about this a lot lately of just like planting the seeds and watering them over time and having the patience that like you don't harvest everything
That's right.
immediately,
That's right. Yeah.
and believing in the vision, believing in yourself and like
Yeah.
the longevity of things and knowing that it is going to work out if you water it, if you show up, like the consistency, you got to tend the soil. Um, that's kind of like, yeah.
So you brought up something that we haven't touched on yet. So you were living somewhere else. Can you tell everyone like where you were before you moved back to Ohio? You weren't always here.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Ohio, more or less born and raised here. And I was in Columbus for college for 5 years. And then I moved out to
Mm.
Long Beach, California. After I'd graduated, I was actually in Cincinnati for about 18 months. And I'd gotten a job at Ripple Junction, which was a licensed apparel company. And it was really cool. And I was really fortunate because it was like, I was using my degree, which was
Mhm.
huge. That's like the biggest hurdle. And like when I was teaching at CCAD, I was just like, look, like, I don't care what job you take out of school. It's like you need to land something in art and design in whatever capacity because it makes your longevity so much easier. Because it's like if you don't have that daily whatever creativity,
Yeah.
it's gonna get lost.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was designing T-shirts for like Hot Topic, Urban Outfitters,
That is so cool.
all this different stuff. I was working. It was when Rick and Morty season 3 was coming. Like before it kind of like fell off, and like it was at
Yeah.
its prime.
So all of the
You know,
people wearing those T-shirts from Hot Topic and Urban Outfitters,
yeah,
design it right here.
it was pretty crazy. Like there've been
Yeah.
times like I was doing PlayStation stuff, and like one of my favorite designs I did. Um, it didn't get picked up for a long time. And then we were
Yeah.
in Long Beach and we're walking around and I saw this design. It was like one of my favorite PlayStation designs. I saw it like every other week.
Oh,
And
wow.
apparently GameStop had picked it up like
Oh, wow.
way after the fact. TJ Maxx, like whatever. TJ Maxx always picked up like really cool, crazy. Anyway, so I was doing licensed apparel, and then I'd always wanted to move to California anyway. Like it had always been the dream,
Who doesn't?
and it's like, especially at the time, pre-COVID, all of that, like, in order to make it as an artist, as a designer, like you got to get the F out of Ohio. Like there's
Yeah.
just like the
Yeah.
opportunity wasn't here. And so it's either you go to New York or you go to LA.
Right.
Maybe Chicago, but that's more for like stand-up comedians, I
Mhm.
feel like.
Yeah.
That's for the funny guys.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was really fortunate. I basically moved into a better position of what I was already doing for
Mm.
a bigger competitor, and went from like the small dog of like the top 5 to like the top dog of the top 5. And
Yeah.
they doubled my salary, which was awesome, but it's also California. And so it was
Yeah.
just like, moved out. It was making like good money for a single 20 something, you
Yeah.
know, and just doing the same thing, living in California. I picked Long Beach specifically because I'd been following, at the time it was called Powwow Worldwide. They've changed the name. They're called Worldwide Walls now. That's a whole other story. Don't need to get into it. And but that's where like all of these amazing street artists that I'd followed were. It's like that's where all the big street
Mm.
art festivals and stuff. And so I was wanting to go there specifically to like get tied in with that. Um, and I was there for a while, kind of like cut my teeth in Long Beach, which was cool.
Yeah.
And got tied in. We can talk about that
Yeah, so
better, but
you were living the California dream, right? That
yeah.
everyone loves. So you're living this California dream. You meet Amina. You guys decide to have a daughter. You move back to Ohio. And how did your career change in those early, like that navigating kind of the early days of parenthood? Like how did you see a shift in your ambitions? Like you said, you were in the top 10, then you're in the top 5, then you're like number 1, right, in this company. So you're at the top of your game and now you're kind of navigating the early days of parenthood. How did you do that? Or did you do that?
Yeah, I was really fortunate because by the time that we had moved back, I had built enough of a foundation and a reputation in my industry that I had planted enough seeds
Mhm.
in Long Beach and like in LA. And I was freelancing for another apparel company, and it was nice because it was just easy money. It was,
Yeah.
and it really worked as like a fallback of like I had that support where I could just hit him up and be like, all right, like, do you have a deck that you need designs for? And because I was getting paid like per design. And so
Okay.
instead of like an hourly rate or like whatever, and so it's like sometimes depending on like what they were looking for, it's like I could just bang out a ton of designs, like easy, just whatever.
Mm.
And that really created this kind of like safety net that I was able to kind of like take a step back from everything
Okay.
and not have to hustle as consistently and really just like be on top of like trying to find new clients and like doing all of this. And
Mm.
like when we moved back as well, like there was an open adjunct position at CCAD, and so
Okay.
I taught there for 2 semesters. which was really helpful in a lot of ways just because it was the first time I did have like a consistent, albeit small, like paycheck every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So it was cool because it was like, all right, this is always handling like utilities and like groceries and then like the t-shirt stuff. It was just like layups to get the mortgage paid,
Right,
you
right,
know? And so it allowed the freedom and the flexibility to be there for my wife, be there for the newborn baby, and it was still tough, but when I mean it was still on mat leave, having that consistency was all
right.
like it balanced out enough that it was like, okay, like we can navigate this shift into parenthood
Yeah.
and it's we're figuring it out,
Yeah, yeah.
and so that was really helpful and like that made it a lot easier to be like, okay, I can take a step back for a moment, but I also have a really hard time. Like, I can't relax. Like, I just like flat out just does not happen.
Just
It's
like
like
an academic,
if
can't
I
relax.
sit still for too long, I die. Like that's
Exactly.
just and
I agree.
my wife's probably just like staring at me, just like, yeah, no, it's
Even my
yeah,
husband, he's like, "You're gonna work." We were
to
doing,
death.
like, financial planning. He was like, "Ariel is going to work until she die." I think for academics, it's something very similar to you. So, in our field, especially as a new academic, so on the tenure track assistant professor, you have these things called, like, early career awards, and they're like you said, kinda like seeds that you plant that help you, like, boost your research, portfolio and your group. It allows you to get basically, like, starting funds. And they are very important for tenure because they are very prestigious awards to win. So for most people, I want to at least win one of these
Right.
before I have a kid because things are going to change and for me, the goal I set for myself, which was a crazy goal at the time, I was like I'm going to win 3 of these awards and then I'm going to have Monza. And so I won 2. I applied for 2, won 2, and I was like, "Okay, I think I'm ready to, um, have a child."
Yeah.
And so I have Monza, and similar to what you said, you have them, you're like, "Okay, I'm good. I'm doing the things I need to do." And then I remember I got invited Monza was maybe 2 months. I got invited to submit a journal article on like a special edition for early career researchers. And the deadline was like in 3 weeks. And I was like, "Oh, I gotta write an entire like paper in 3
Right.
weeks." And then that was the first time where I said, "I might miss a deadline."
Oh yeah, we had talked about this before.
Yes,
Yeah.
remember we talked
Oh,
and
for
I
sure.
was losing it. I'm
Yeah.
internally, I was losing it because I had never ever in my life been scared of missing a deadline, but
Right.
there was just not enough time in the day to get it all done. Like
Right.
take care of Monsa, write this paper. My mom had left, so it was just my husband and I. And my husband looked at me and he said, "I'll just take care of Monsa and you just write the paper."
Right.
And I felt like a grad student all over again. I was like sitting at our dining room table like every day for like a week, not really having much interaction with my son because I'm like, I gotta write this paper, I gotta write this paper. And when I finally, pressed submit and it was done, I remember saying to myself, "Oh, this is going to be very different now."
Right.
Like, the way I do this job is going to be very different, and I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. Did you have any of those moments where you felt like your ambition or your goals were starting to shift a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of it is especially in the early days too, it's just like the sleep deprivation, your
Yep.
needs, like you're stretched so far and few between all of these new responsibilities.
Mhm.
And for me, for the longest time, it was like I'd work during the day, go home, like eat, do whatever, and then like you just hustle the rest of the night and like
Yeah.
you work on your like the side hustle, you work
Yeah.
on your personal work. And because for me, it was just like, how do you lay that foundation? How do you break out into this new industry? You're the little Ohio guy coming into California
Yeah.
and where it's like everybody's huge, everybody's chasing their dreams, everybody's doing it. And then, coming back, I was fortunate that I had laid enough the groundwork that I was still getting LA clients, which was great.
Right.
And, but, you know, I had to really redivest all of my time because
Mhm.
like my daughter, like she had a lot of like colic issues, like my wife, like just not even just like her, but just like postpartum, I don't think enough people talk about the impact and the effect that it has for both like the mother and the father.
You better say that again.
And it's huge because it's just like something that I've really been grappling with a lot is like the last couple years. It's just like my mental health has just been
In
absolute
in the
trash,
trash can.
absolutely in the trash can,
In the
just
tr
fried. And just finally coming out and being on the other side of that has been huge. But you know, kind of circling back just a little bit, it's just like you can't just like come home and work longer when your baby's just like screaming and
Yep.
won't like you can't sit
No.
down and your wife's like recovering from shitting out a baby.
Yeah.
And am I allowed to cuss on here?
Yeah,
Sure
you
not.
can
Like I like was trying to censor myself earlier, but anyway, we can always whatever, it doesn't matter. And so that was huge, mentally just like being exhausted all the time,
Uh-huh.
also just like deciding that I was gonna, like, teach at the same time was crazy, and I almost didn't teach my 2nd semester after V was born because, um, going into the fall that I was teaching the 1st semester, like, my digital media illustration class, like, it was the tail end of the pregnancy, and then V was born, like, the day final grades were
Ah,
due,
that's
and I
right.
had the
December
I
baby,
had the
yeah.
illustration department head, I was just like, "Dude, I'm not gonna do this, so, like, I need you to input grades for me," and he was just like, "Bet, I got you." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Alright." And, but then I almost didn't teach, but I had the opportunity to teach self promo for illustrators, which was like the class that I got so much
That's
out
your thing,
of
yeah.
and what I was like really passionate about. And like, I remember being like a week into that class, maybe like 2 weeks, and just like on the brink of a mental breakdown, like
Yeah.
every day, I literally shaved my head after like one night, like before class, and it's like I go in
Yeah.
the next day, I like take my beanie off, and everybody's just like,
Yeah.
Are you good, bro? Like, are you okay?" And I was just like, "Nah,
Students are
we're
not
figuring it
forget
out. Like, I don't know." And, you know, and you figure it out though.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
But I think you bring with the figure it out comment is very even common for academics because that's how you've gotten this far. By
oh, for
any
sure.
means necessary. I'm gonna just figure it out. Even if internally things are just cracking and falling apart, I'm gonna figure this out and I'm going to get this done. Yeah, by
And
any means.
there's just not another option.
Well, we were just talking about how you're teaching your class, you're like a week or 2 into the class and you feel like, "Okay, I shouldn't have done this. My mental health is starting to break." Like, what was really on a deeper level, what was, causing your mental health to start to deteriorate?
So, we had always kinda, like, joked, like, before we had a kid that, like, I don't like babies. I don't fuck with babies. Like, I had no interest in dealing with babies. Like, babies don't do anything for me. And,
I love
but like, I
this.
was always like, I'm a toddler. I'm a kid guy. Like, when we can play, when we can get silly, when we can like have fun, that's cool. I got no interest just like hanging out with a screaming, shitting vegetable. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Toddler
doesn't do that.
toddler dad.
It's, yeah, absolutely. And so for that, like, the transition into that of just being like, "Oh, this just never fucking
They
ends."
never
Like, it is
Ooh,
just like it
yes.
just does not stop. Like, it is just screaming constantly. Everybody's fried. Everybody's just, like, snipping at each other. Like, nothing's fun. Like,
No.
there is no
It's
good
no
moment,
good
period. Like, it
moment.
fucking sucks straight
I'm
across the
glad
board.
you're
I
saying it.
I like, straight up, real talk, I absolutely fucking hate the newborn phase.
Mm,
Do not like it. 100% was just like we were like 5 months in, I'm like, "Never again." I was ready to go get a vasectomy that day. I was like, "Absolutely
I
not.
love
No baby,
it.
not like, absolutely not."
Yeah.
And, looking back and like, I've been trying to engage more with, people on threads and like talking, just being again, like more vulnerable and like talking more about like new parenthood, fatherhood, creativity, like all of these different things because it was just like, you know, every day feels like the world's on fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It never
and like
ends, yeah.
just never ends. And like one of the things with that too was like um that I really talked about a lot with a couple friends of mine. Like I felt like 2023 was the year that I just got like hit with like the crippling reality of like what being an adult is. And it's just like
Mm.
it's not like life isn't just like fun and starry-eyed and like a good time anymore. It's
Yeah.
like you're not partying, you're not like going out, you don't have like the flexibility and the freedom. It's like, no, you got to show up every fucking day and go to work and pay your bills and like pay your taxes and pay your mortgage and like, day in, day out, it
It's
doesn't
boring.
change.
It's
It sucks.
boring.
It's
Yeah, it's
boring and it's not
overrated.
fun,
Mhm.
And I really truly struggled with like coming back when we did from California because we had talked about going to Seattle to Denver to Portland, all these different things. Like we had the intention of coming back to Ohio eventually when we were ready to have kids.
Yeah.
And, you know, the decision was kind of made for us because like my mom was having some health issues.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things too where it was just like, okay, do we go someplace for a couple years just to move to Ohio anyway and have a kid in a couple, what like
Yeah.
at this point, like 3 years or so is a minimal difference.
Yeah.
It's like I was established enough with my career that it was like nobody can take that away from me.
Yeah, yeah,
And I can
yeah.
and I can do that from wherever. And like the whole goal since forever is to be able to work and travel doing my own thing, working for myself, being able to go to either California, like whatever, having that
Mhm.
flexibility. And but coming back like when we did, you know, it was really hard for me just going from being surrounded by all of these amazing artists who were better than me and not to like toot my own horn a little bit, but
Yeah.
like as being someone who left and then came back, it's like I was returning home at a much higher caliber
Okay.
and, and really doing like walking the walk, like putting my
Yeah.
money where my mouth is, and like doing it and like making it happen. And coming home to like all of my friends who I looked up to or were like a couple years ahead of me in school, it's like they're either in LA or in New York, and anybody who didn't move away, except for like maybe one or two people, it's like they haven't done anything since graduation.
Mm.
And so coming home and being like more of this outsider, lacking anyone to really look up to and be driven by, it
Yeah.
it became hard to keep the momentum and keep, because it's like it's one thing, it's like when you've got people challenging you
Yeah.
and it's just like and I
Yeah.
have people who I'd reach out to and be like, "Oh yeah," like trying to get feedback and everybody's just like, "Fucking great big dog, like you're awesome, like you're such an inspiration." I'm like, dude, I don't need you to sit here and like tell me how good I am. Like I know I'm
Mm.
good. Like, I need somebody to challenge me and push me
Right.
and like help do these.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was really tough. And also, like, I've always tried to do too many things all at once. And
Yeah.
so while I was at school, I was like, I was meeting these other professors and I was like really trying to shift the focus from like, I've spent all the time learning like the art side of things. Now it's like the business side of things. And so
Yeah.
I had all these ideas, but then it's just like, you just don't have the space to do any of that when you have a baby. And it's like your baby takes all of the time and all of your resources.
Yep.
And so that was like a tough part of it, like in the early days. And we like I said earlier, we were really fortunate. Amina had the support from work with like mat leave, but then like a month after she got back, she got laid off. And so then we had this like reality strike of just like, oh, you gotta fucking like do it now. It's not just like
Yeah.
you don't have somebody like hold your hand. It's literally just like you are the
You have
breadwinner,
2 people to
and it's
provide
just
for,
like
yeah.
and it's like, this is where you've been trying to get to, and it's like and you're doing it, and it's like I was really fortunate that, like, Amina was able to, like, keep reminding me that it's like, "Hey, this is, like, what you've been trying to do," and it's like the fact that you are doing this and, like, you are providing for us, like, is huge, but it's doesn't feel good
It doesn't feel
when
good, no.
it's just like things are really tight, and, it's
Yeah.
like we went from a dual income California household for the longest time to being like just a freelancer basically, just like taking care of like a baby and a wife and like, her postpartum and like the baby and like all of these other things. It's like that doesn't leave room for me to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And, that's something that I'm very fortunate. I finally have a therapist that I'm really doing well with. I had a guy that I was going to during that year, like 2023, whenever that was. And like he just kind of felt like a high school football like history
Yep.
teacher coach. And it was
Yeah.
just like never really did anything. Like he would just let me
Yeah.
like talk,
Talk.
like
Yep.
which is fine. And like there's a level of that, but it was like it was never doing anything outside of that. And it was just
Yeah.
like when my wife was having some pretty serious like health issues and everything else, like I reached out to him like in crisis mode one day and he just absolutely fucking dropped the ball on me. And I was like, dude, like this is your job. Like you just
Yeah.
like literally just wrote me off when I just sent you this text like, yo, bro, like everything is falling apart right now. He was like, okay, cool. Well, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And I was like, dude, like, what if I just went and blew my fucking brains out right now?
Yeah.
Like, what
What are
any
you gonna
yeah,
do? Yeah.
like, what is going on here?
And I think
Um,
you bring up a valid point too, because people will say, I had a similar experience. Like after I had Mansa, I started to feel, like not myself. I was feeling very unlike myself. And you can't really put a name on it. So the therapist that I had been seeing, who I loved, who I'm back seeing now, when I moved to Columbus, she also went on maternity leave. So I found a new therapist that was supposed to, specialize in postpartum. And like you said, it just felt like every day I was just every week we were just talking. And it was like talking to a friend that, or a person that didn't really know me. But another part of that was I really feel like I wasn't getting anywhere with her, but I was also just very tired too. So
right,
sometimes I would go after I've talked to students all day and I'm like, I just don't have anything else to give. Like I'm just drained by the day. So I stopped. I wasn't getting anything out of the therapy. And so I stopped it. And I felt like my mental health started to just deteriorate more and more. I feel like every month the thread was just getting
thinner and thinner.
thinner and thinner.
Yeah,
Like, I felt like at any point, I felt like I am on the verge of a mental breakdown.
right,
Like, I always feel bad for the first class that I taught after coming after maternity leave. Probably was, like, the worst, SEIs or student evaluations that I ever received. And, one time a student said something like, "The professor just doesn't seem interested in teaching us." And it wasn't that I love the subject that
right,
I was teaching them, it's, like, my research area. But I was just tired.
right.
I was exhausted. I was staying up all night because, my husband's in the military, so I am a single mom. And so, I've just stayed up all night with a teething 6-month-old,
Right.
and now I gotta come in here for an hour and a half and talk about fatigue. I'm fatigued,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like, I need to
Like,
talk about
personal
myself.
fatigue and, like,
Right,
material
and
like, engine
fatigue,
fatigue, like, all this other
yes.
stuff, yeah, it's like
I'm feeling it all, and, it wasn't that I was even my students who I was teaching, and some of those students I knew personally, they were being affected by that, and that was also hard because you're really struggling. The worst thing any professor can do is read those SEIs. If you're having a bad day, you
oh,
never
yeah,
because sometimes students just go in, they are not forgiving. And I remember reading those SEIs and just I was like done for the week.
right,
I was like, "You know what? Like, I'm just ready to, like, quit this whole job." Like, because it was a lot of things all at once. And I think you also make a very valid point of people glamorize the newborn phase. It is not
no, it
fun.
sucks, it's
It
awful, it's the worst.
sucks. And I think we need to be better. And I think I know for women, you don't wanna say that because when you say that, people automatically go to,
Oh,
"Well, you don't love your child."
it gets
Like
better, it's gonna be okay, you're gonna miss this. No, I'm not,
I remember
I'm
saying it
like
to my grandma, and she was like, "Well, I had 7 kids." Well, that was your choice.
yeah,
Like, do
whose fault
you
is that?
right, do you, right?
Like
Like, everyone like you said, everyone's always, like, bringing in their experience, but it really does suck, and it really sucks another thing you said that's so true for academics. You work your job, you come home, work out, eat, and then you go back to doing work until you go to sleep.
right,
When you have a kid, that job has to turn off, your day job turns off, and then the parental or parent job turns on. And I think for me, the struggle was turning this one off to turn this one on.
right,
And in that, again, for me, I'm very career driven. There's no secret about it. I'm not pretending not to be.
right,
So for me, it was just like very difficult to say to myself, I had this expectation that these are the goals that I've set and I must meet these goals by
right,
this time. I don't care what people say that I have to redefine. I'm not redefining anything.
right.
And so there was like this tug of war between like what was happening and what I wanted to be happening and what was actually happening.
Oh, for sure. And like, I think one thing that's really helped me, and it's like I've had this happen enough times in my career now that it's just like I know that this is how it is, and it's like I know it's going to work out. The
Yeah.
timing is going to happen when it's supposed to happen,
Mhm.
and like I think especially for students, like going back to teaching, and it's just so funny. Like you did talk about like the student evaluations. Like I had this one student who literally put more effort into just like ripping me apart
They
than they
do.
did the entire semester.
They do.
And it was just like it was just so funny because it was just like worst professor that CCAD's ever hired. And I'm like, he has
They
no
go
value.
in.
Like, yeah, it was crazy. And but no, just like being able to step back and recognize that it's like a lot of those goalposts that we put and these time frames and these like restrictions or you know, factors around making these things happen, it's just like it's all arbitrary. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we have the ability, it's like we are creating our own reality. We're like we're paving our own path. We're doing these things and being able to, like I said, it's just like planting those seeds and it's like you can't harvest it if it's not ready.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's what
whether
I like that. I like
and,
that.
like, all of your crops take different times to grow. Like, they all
Yeah.
have different cycles and seasons and whatever else, and it's like, you also can't harvest them if you're not able to pour in enough to feed them and water them properly, and it's like, you can't water everything all the
No.
time, and, like, the biggest thing for me that it's like I've been trying to be better about and, like, starting to work with my therapist is just, like, unlearning a lot of, like, codependency and like people pleasing
Oh,
and
yeah.
putting everyone else first before myself
Yeah.
and like you can't pour from a cup that's empty,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that's one thing, trying to from like the father's side of things and trying to, unlearn these like ingrained senses of like masculinity and like what it means to be like the provider and everything else of just like, I felt like there wasn't space for me to feel any type of way. And it's
Mm.
like, I can't be drained because it's like everybody else has it harder than me. Like I
Yeah.
didn't shit the baby out. I didn't get torn in half. Like I'm not going through all of these other things.
Yeah.
And, it's like still got to pay the bills, still got to take care, like still got to feed the family, still got to make sure that like
Yeah.
they're taken care of and like all of these other things. And it not feeling like there's a room for yourself, but also like not room to talk about it because it's just like, there's still so much stigma around just mental health period, let alone for like men.
Yep, I would say for men, yeah.
And so like and that's huge. And like, a really good friend of mine, it's like we talk about this a lot and it's like I'm really thankful for him, but it's like I was really kind of like getting on him because I was just like, dude, like I really appreciate you having this space for me and like you always talk about how you want to be better about it, but it's like anytime I try to come to you to see how you're doing, you just write it off and
Yeah.
you give me like because it's like we'll be going back and forth, and it's just like I'll feel bad because I'll blow him up with like a 40-page fucking novel, just like my life's on fire and I'm about to go out for a pack of smokes and not come home. And he's over here just like, today was kind of hard, but I'm good. And I'm just like, bro, come on.
Yeah.
And then he comes around, he's just like, oh yeah, dude, like, like, oh, I just want to like start doing this and like blah blah blah. It's just like, A, you just gotta do it. If you're gonna do it, like quit telling me it's like, oh, I want to be like you, bro, and I want to start doing my art and I want to start doing this and I want to start be like you. And it's just like, that's cool, but it's like you've been saying that for 3 years now. Like, you just gotta do it,
Right.
and
Right.
so it's like that's beside the point,
But I
but
know, but and I think you bring up a valid point, and I think in the Black culture, mental health is just, as you said, very taboo, but I think for Black men, it's even worse because this
for sure.
toxic masculinity, I have a cousin who is really starting to get into mental health and has kind of formed this group, and it gives him the space, and I can even see a change in him since he's been doing that. But if I say, most Black men, even postpartum, it's like you have you're experiencing something too, and you need to go talk to someone,
Right,
and it's okay for you to experience. I think just in men. For men in general, you also are being affected in this postpartum phase. Yes, you did not have the baby, right?
right,
That is very true that there are differences now, but
for sure.
but there is still an experience that's happening that you're being affected by. And so it's better to, get help instead of, being in this denial bubble that this is not happening, or like you said, where I feel like I can't
Right,
experience this. It's not fair for me because I didn't have the baby. That you bring up a valid point there. I think another thing too, you were saying for you, it's like people pleasing, and I think for like me and even like other academics, it's perfectionism,
For
right?
sure.
Like that I need to be perfect. I have struggled with that my entire life,
Right.
perfectionism at like perfectionist attitude. It was magnified when I had my son.
Oh, really?
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, because I felt like I was struggling so much, but I needed to hold it together because I was like, I can't let people see me struggling. Like, what
Right.
do you mean struggle? I don't. So it actually it became a motivator in the worst way because I was so busy instead of handling the emotions and the postpartum anxiety and depression that I was having, I was so busy pretending that it wasn't happening and I was going harder in my job
Right.
and to the point where I was just at the I was on I would like I told you, I'm sitting at the edge. If anything happens, I'm falling off. Like
Right.
and I went harder. So if you look at my CV during that time, you're like, oh, she was killing it in
Right.
2023, 20, 2024. You asked me, I was dying on the inside, right? Because
100%.
I was not I needed to keep up this perfectionist attitude until it literally crumbled on me, right? And I was kind of forced to say, this is not working, right? And I've got to do something different. The struggle with that is, people will say, well, what you brought this up too about kind of redefining like your goals, right? Like maybe I'm not going to get this project this year, but I'm planting the seed, it'll come 2 years. That's still difficult to kind of accept.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And, you want everything to happen right now.
Right.
And I remember when, when V was really young and like those last few semesters at CCAD, I was trying, I have these like 3 branches of my creative uh business and industry that I'm like trying to create, with Ajax Anvil Company. And, I was writing all this stuff out and I was like, all right, cool. It's like I finally had it like dialed in where it was like, okay, I've got this like apparel lifestyle side of things. I've got like the bread and butter business of like
Yeah.
branding merch and murals. And then it's like I want to do this like teaching and coaching and like, more speaking and like podcast, all of this kind of stuff, like encouraging
Yeah.
people to like whatever. And, trying to build everything simultaneously at the same time. And then it's just like, no, you just can't do this.
Yeah.
And it's just like you're at your breaking point where it's like, we are probably getting to like burnout where it's just like you try to do everything all at once. Like you're going 100% all the time. And then, if you're not able to catch it in time, you burn the engine out like
Yeah.
completely. And then the recovery it takes to get out of that is so, so much harder. And because it's like you're just fried.
You're
Like
fried.
there is absolutely no energy left for anything. And that impacts every aspect of your
Yeah.
life, you know? The
But it's because I think too when you're in your career and you're at the top of your career, you believe that you can have it all.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I know for me, I was like, I'm gonna toot my horn. I was killing this job, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm getting everything I'm going for. I'm actually not losing.
right,
Like I'm not getting proposals rejected. That wasn't my story. I'm like, I got it all. Like I'm killing this. And then I had Monza and I was like, oh,
right,
that all is looking very like it's getting cut in half and getting cut into a third and a fourth. So it definitely was very different, and I just had a lot of trouble shifting my mindset. And I definitely was teetering. Well, it's not teetering. I was burnt out.
right, for sure. And, I think one thing too, like the summer after V was born, so she was probably about like 6 months old. Um, I had this opportunity where it was just like, okay, cool. This is like we're stepping into the big game. Like,
Yeah.
we're going from like, you know, beer money, kind of paying the projects to being like, all right, cool. It's like we're making like the big business money. Like we're doing it. Like
Yeah.
and it was a really big reality check for me where I fucking fumbled the bag. And it wasn't entirely my
Mm.
fault, at the time, it was people pleasing. It's not, I think, uh especially in like the creative like anything, but especially in the creative industry and like what I'm trying to do now, instead of, giving like underselling yourself and over delivering for the sake of like trying to get somebody to hire you,
Yeah.
regardless of like where the alignment is, you know, it's very much just like the abundance mindset where it's just like, okay, look, like if you don't have the budget for it, or if like whatever, it's just like I can meet you someplace, but it's like I'm not gonna like cut
Mhm.
whatever. So like the issue was, this guy reached out to me. He was a like investment capital, like, some big money, like investor, whatever, capital, whatever. And they had bought this mobile home community in Southern California, and they were wanting to like beautify the neighborhood, fix it up. It had been around since like the 50s, and it was kind of like run down, and they were wanting to just like make it nicer. They were wanting to do all these murals and like do this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was just like, if we do like pie in the sky proposal, I was just like, all right, like $150,000, huge, huge thing. And he was like, all right, dog, like I'm not trying to dump 150 grand into just like painting these walls. And I was like, all right, that's cool. I get it. I'm just whatever.
Yeah.
But he agreed to 50. And so it was
Okay.
like, I was like, that's huge. That's awesome. I
Yeah.
was at the time, it was like, I was barely getting anybody to like agree to pay like 5K for a wall. And I was like undercharging, you know?
Uh,
And so, we were going back and forth, and it's like, I agreed. And I was just like, look, like, I'm going to simplify the designs. I'm going to meet you where you are, but, you know, I'm doing this because it's like the way we had talked, I was like, I believe in like uplifting this community. I wanted to like give back to them, like have them like transform their space because it's like in the middle of just like this industrial, just like shit pit. It's
okay.
all just like barren desert. It's not close. It's not somewhere cute in California. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like it's all just like junkyards and like fast food and whatever. And so I was like, all right, cool. Like, how can we transform this? Like, make it beautiful. Like, whatever. They're doing this work, and we were going back and forth, and like they flew me out to like do a site inspection, do all this stuff. We're rolling. We're good. And you know, after like 2 months of like doing all this work, he was finally just like, "Oh, hey, we decided that we'd rather just do a big like vinyl mural on this like busted brick wall instead, and we whatever, and we're just going to like we don't want you to come paint it anymore."
Oh,
And it was
wow.
just like, "Cool." And it's like I had created a contract for the project, but it was like it was not bulletproof enough, and it was
Wow.
like one of those things. It was like
Wow.
it was a really big, just like shitty like life lesson, and it was
Mm.
like the universe just being like, look, like you got to just button your shit up before you can take this step into that degree of like you're not ready for that yet,
Yeah.
and it was devastating, because like I had spent months on this work, and he was just like, okay, well, just send me the files. I'm like, no, bro, like you're not like I'm not gonna let you just like print these out and have it look bad. And
Yeah.
and he was also just like, I was like, okay, like I'll send them to you, but you still owe me another like 10K. And he was
Mm.
just like, why should I pay you for digital files? And I'm just like, that's not the point.
Right.
It's
This
just
is a
like
contract that we
I
had.
did all this extra work where it's like I designed all this. Doesn't matter. We're getting beside the point. And but ultimately, it was just like I professionally, it was a good learning lesson because I stood up for myself, and I was just like, hey, look, like up until this point, like I really appreciated you reaching out, and like we'd had a really good relationship up until that point. And I was just like, hey, like, you know, ultimately we are not in alignment on value or on our values, because it's like for him,
Mm.
it was just about the dollar sign, and
Right.
it wasn't about actually uplifting and beautifying, like doing all this
Right.
other stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a really good lesson. And it's just like learning to step back and just take the L's when you need to also
Mm.
learn to say no, to stick up for yourself, to set those boundaries, and to open up the space for the people and products that value
Yeah.
you. Um, I definitely think we got off subject.
That's
Oh, but
okay.
but the whole point with that was it was just like that was devastating.
Yeah.
That was just like that really clipped my wings because I was like feeling like I was like finally getting that momentum again. And I was like, all right, cool. It's like we're finally like getting back in the bag. Like we're making these moves. Like this is like the big break. We're gonna like pay this debt off. We're gonna be like
Right.
set for the next few months. Cause like at
Yeah.
that point it was just like we're both just like deep in the postpartum. We're in a fucking bad spot. We're not having a good time,
Yeah.
and money was tight, everything's tight,
Yeah.
having a bad time. And it was just like that was going to be like the big break,
and then it's
and
falling apart.
and it just fell apart.
And I think when things like that happen, like when you feel like, okay, I'm starting to feel like myself again. I feel like I'm getting my momentum back. And for us, it's like submitting a proposal, right? For me, it was submitting papers. Like I came back, I'm like, I'm going to submit these papers. I submitted 3 papers. They all 3 got like rejected.
Oh, man,
And
yes.
I was like, I am a very good writer. What is wrong with you? And I remember like my confidence and like worth is, and this is could be a whole nother YouTube video, but my worth is so much tied working through therapy with that to how well I'm doing.
Oh,
So
100%.
I'm already feeling like here because I'm not really operating at the same wavelength that I used to operate before Monza. So I'm already here. I've
Right.
spent months writing these papers, working with students to write these papers. I submit these papers. Papers mean a lot when you're trying to get tenure, and then they all 3 get rejected, literally like the same week.
So it's
And
like when they're all back to back too, it's just like, "Oh, wow," just
like the
like
universe is
yeah,
just like,
just like,
"No, what's
"Nope,
going
nope, nope."
on?"
Yeah.
Like I mean, I that was this summer.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
like I'm thinking, okay, months is a little bit over 1 at this point, and all 3 of these papers get rejected. I've spent pretty much all summer writing them,
right.
and I'm feeling like if my mental health was at like 1, I'm at a -100 right now,
Right.
right? It's just really bad. And I think for me, and you probably feel similarly, you know, again, I'm single here in Columbus. You have your wife, but she's also going through her own things. Who is supporting you?
That's something I'm, like, trying to find out too, because it's like she does her best, and, like, I'm very fortunate because it's like, when I really do need it, like, when I am just, like, in that bad spot, like, she comes through and, like, helps me remind me
Yeah.
of, like, "Look, like, you're doing it, like, you're doing a good job, like,
Yeah.
just chill out, like, it's gonna be okay." But, that's, like, part of my problem is, like, I've never felt like I've been able to ask for help, and I know that that's not
Mhm.
true,
Oh, I know
it's
what
just
you
like
mean.
and because it's like my family especially, it's just like, if I need anything, they'll do it,
Right.
and I'm very fortunate for that, but it's just like, again, there's like that stigma and that level of just like, you shouldn't have to ask for help,
Yeah.
and, like, learning to ask for help. How are we good on the battery? Okay.
Okay.
I feel like we're probably fine unless somebody comes, like, banging on the door and look,
Yeah, I
so
think
I don't think it's, like, too
students,
bad.
yeah. The thing about
Yeah,
it too is I know for me, it was like I never get to like Amin and I were talking about this. Like as a single parent, you never get to tap out. So
right.
it's like my papers have gotten rejected. I really just probably need like a moment, right?
For
To
sure.
to
Got cut loose.
yeah, to just come down because I'm really up here now.
Right.
And I gotta pick my son up from daycare and the day must go on. Right.
For
Like
sure. It
he didn't care that my papers got rejected.
yeah.
What okay, I want my mac and cheese, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the mac and cheese.
Right. I don't care that your
Yeah.
papers got forget your papers. And you never have a moment to get, to get back to the balance. Cause I mean, it is an academic. You get rejected. I mean, so it's not like rejection is
That's just part of it. It's like you
it's a
again, it
right.
was like
It's
I
a
was talking to somebody about this the other day and just like, trying to tell my students when I was teaching, it's like, "Look, like, you have to get comfortable with getting rejected."
oh yeah.
Like, that's just part of it,
But I
and
think the issue with that when your mental health, like when your worth is so you're not, you feel like you're in parenthood, you feel like you're not doing well. I don't know if I'm doing well as a mother, right? It's very different, by metrics in academia if you're doing well or not. But as a parent, no one's telling you if you're doing well or not, right?
my wife would hate that I say this, but it's like, I know I'm fucking killing it because like, my daughter is obsessed with me.
She is.
It's tough. I
She
feel bad. I do feel
sorry,
bad,
Amina,
like
but she really
yeah,
is.
she's a daddy's girl, like,
She is a
through and through.
daddy.
She's big time daddy's girl, and,
She is.
yeah.
Thank you.
Monta's obsessed with me too, so it's fine,
Monster
but
is obsessed with you. He really is, and he doesn't
but you're a
like
great mom. You are a great mom. I'm
thank
not, like, trying to, like
you,
I'm just
thank
like,
you.
Monta's awesome.
Yeah, Monster doesn't like many people, but he does like Jack.
Yeah, he's a little homie.
Yeah. But I think it's when you're already like feeling bad about yourself and like you said for you it's like losing on this contract, you think it's going to be like the thing that kind of pushes you guys up and makes you start to feel good about yourself again, which brings up a whole nother point again about worth being tied to how well you're doing,
for sure.
which is very common for ambitious people, and career driven people. But I think when you get those blows and you're already feeling low, it's like 100%
It's so much worse.
worse.
It's so much worse.
I remember, like, for me, I got those rejections. It was like like late July, early August. August was a terrible month for me.
Yeah. Oh,
Probably
yeah, I think,
like,
like, that's something like, what, last summer? Yeah, last summer was awful. Wait,
yeah, this past
I
summer.
keep thinking, like, last year was 2023.
It's so sad because
2024 ended up, like, I had a hard time throughout the because, like, last year was hard, like, last year just, like,
last year sucked.
kicked my
I
ass,
mean,
but
from
I was
January to December.
yeah, it was just shit show after another, but it was like I was really it's like I had a moment, like, right before the holiday, like, right before I went out to LA or to San Francisco, and I was just like, I got my groove back. Like I'm the fucking guy.
Mhm.
Like I was flown out to LA for a mural for to help open a restaurant in January, end of January, and then I was flown out to San Francisco to help do a mural for another one in December,
Yeah.
and then did all this stuff in between too. And it's like it had felt like because it's again it never stops. Like
Yeah.
it's especially this year it was nice because it's like I started finally like charging on like full package
Yeah.
deals,
Yeah.
charging these higher premium rates, and it makes a much bigger difference because it's like, the money's more consistent. It's there's just more of it, and
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
it gives you that more breathing room, but at the same time, just like feeling like you have to be on top because like being self-employed, it's like you're wearing so many hats on top of being a parent,
Yeah.
on top of like, you know, taking care of everybody else. Um, but it was really nice just, like, finally, like, looking back and being like, "Okay, like, we did it. Like, we're
Yeah.
here, like,
Yeah.
we got through it. We're on the other side, and we're in this place now where it was just like, I did have the ability to, basically be off for the last couple weeks, and so I started this, now that school's back in session and, like, kids are back in daycare and stuff, it makes it easier,
Yeah.
and, like, the first part of the week, I was kinda tripping. I'm like, "Alright, I'm not worried yet, but I gotta, like, start I gotta get back in the saddle to
Yeah.
and it was great because like, in the last day or 2, it was just like, I had this huge influx, and it's like, I'm basically booked for the rest of the month now,
Okay.
and it's all cool, and I'm like, "Alright," like, again, the universe provides. You just like,
Yes. Yes.
you have to
The Lord
believe that,
provides.
like, and yeah, exactly. Like, the Lord, like, whatever it is, like, because I'm not super religious, but I'm very spiritual, and so, like,
Mhm.
in the sense where it's just like, you know whatever the higher power you believe in is,
Mhm.
it's just like it's like believing in whatever energy that you wanna believe in.
Mhm.
It's just like knowing that it's just like you put out and you receive what you put out, and
Mhm.
it's just like knowing and believing and just like having that faith, you know, is huge,
Yeah.
and I think,
Yes.
like, you know and I think that's, like, a very, like, universal thing that it's like, because like, for a lot of people where it's like, I grew up in the church and, like, left the church and I had my angsty moment where I'm just like, oh, like, there is no God, bleh," whatever, and, like, you go through that, and
Yeah.
then you come back and it's like, it's all spiritual. It's all just, like, having faith, honestly, like, in that higher power, in yourself, like, whatever that is,
Oh, it's like an
and
anchor. It's an anchor.
100%, and, like,
100%. Yeah.
that's what's gotten me through so much, and I think, like, you can probably relate to this too, where it was just like, it's, being 10 plus years in, is just like, this is the only option. Like,
Yeah.
this is what,
I've been in school for a long time to do this.
yeah, it's
I
like,
was in school for a long time.
this is, like, what
Yes.
it's like, I've been putting the time in, you've been putting the time in, like, there is no
Yeah.
other option,
Yeah.
like, there's been a couple times where I was, like, about to give up, and I'm like, "Man, like, do I need to just, like, go get a job at Abercrombie, like, at the design
You would
not, like,
hate
in
it.
stock." Oh, oh,
I had those thoughts
absolutely.
too. Like, I could go to industry, make a lot more money, have a regular 9 to 5. I would hate it. But
Right.
I want to touch on something because we're almost out of time. I want to touch on something that you talked about going to therapy. What made you decide to start seeing a therapist?
So, my wife, she had,
Amina's.
she had pushed for it when we first started dating. Like, she's been, like, therapy queen forever. She's been a very, like, avid, therapy, supporter and,
It's
whatever
an advocate.
advocate,
Yeah.
yeah, there we go, advocate. And I had gone to a few different people, before, like, I had a lady that I went to in Long Beach for a little bit, and, like, she specifically did, like, inner child work, and, like, at the time when I was going to her, it was, like, height of the pandemic and, like, kind of just,
Yeah.
like I was like, "Alright, like, we got there's too much, like, right the fuck now shit on fire that it's like, I had a great childhood, I'm perfect, I'm fine, like, no, I don't have trauma." And so, didn't really go to her for very long because it wasn't really doing anything for me.
Yeah, yeah,
And then, the year that V was born in 2023, it's like I was just like, all right, like I am in a bad spot. Like I like just again, I'm at like negative 100, and it's
awesome.
bad. It's so
Yeah,
bad. And high school football coach homie, like it was good for the sake that it's like I was able to like vent and like get some stuff out,
yeah.
but it wasn't really addressing
Nope.
anything.
You're not getting to the
And
root. You're
exactly.
not getting to the root, yeah.
And so it was nice. I finally like this year with everything else going on in like 2024, it was just like I was in a really, really bad spot again because again, it's like I was putting everyone else first and not really taking the time to take care of myself, not doing any of those things, and just like pushing myself to do, for my career.
Yeah.
And because it was just like, look, like we still got to make money,
Yeah, we still have to pay the bills,
and
like, yes, you have to eat.
so there's all this going on, and I've finally been going to my therapist Jackie for a couple, probably like 3 or 4 months now,
Okay.
and, like, consistently, because like, before it'd be, like, once every couple weeks, maybe, like, once a month, like,
Uh-huh.
whatever,
That
and it
was
was just
me,
like
that was me.
we're going, like, weekly, and, like, when we
Mhm.
first got started, like, I was in, like, a really, really bad spot and, like, going sometimes twice a week because I was just like, "I'm, like, not I am not having a good time."
Yeah.
And it was really nice, about a month ago, I'd kind of, like also, doing my, like, social media therapy, whatever, just, like, seeing all of these sources from, like, just relating to people posting stuff about therapy and
Yeah,
inner
yeah, I know what
child,
you mean,
all of
yeah.
that kinda stuff, and so it's like, there was all of these things where it's like, "Oh, wow, that's, like, too relatable," and then it's like, as you kind of, like, get your algorithm into that, it's just like, "Oh, wow, maybe there is, like, maybe my shit is, like, pretty fucked up." And I was like, maybe I do need to, like, kinda start addressing these, like, really,
These
like, deeper,
issues,
like, root cause
yeah,
kinda
oh my
things because it was
gosh.
like, the biggest thing, that I realized, is that, like, trauma isn't just because it's like I was very privileged in the fact that it's like I came from a very supportive, like, upper middle class family, my parents loved me, they didn't, like, beat me and, like, abuse me or anything, it's like
Mhm.
I didn't have any, like, weird uncles do anything, and, like, none like, I didn't have any of
What you
these.
would consider
Yeah,
something to
like,
complain about.
nothing that yeah, exactly.
Yes,
It's
I
like
know what you mean.
I was provided for, I was supported, I had everything that I needed.
Mhm.
They encouraged me to pursue whatever it is, like, my needs
Yeah,
were always met.
yes.
And so for me, it was just like, I don't have trauma, and then but realizing that it's just like, "Oh, okay," like, a very kind of like there are all these other things that do impact that,
That's
like,
right.
the dynamic between, like, my dad like, so my parents got divorced when I was really young,
Mhm.
and, like, before I could like, they were always separated, and
Yeah.
so my dad, like, being creative, like, he's a fine artist, and he's from the generation where it was just like at the time, it's like, you just painted and, like, your art dealer, like, sold things for you,
Okay.
and then after they moved back from New York, like, his career kind of, like, fell off, like, when they got divorced and they moved back to Ohio
Yeah.
and so he lost his trajectory, and so he's
Mm.
had these, like, cycles of boom and bust where it's like he's had times like, he did all the art for Breitling for, like, 15 years,
Okay.
and so he was flush for a while, like, when I was, like,
Yeah.
in later high school, but it was like, there were all these times growing up where he's just like, "I can't come get you this weekend because 'cause I've got $16 in my name and I can't put gas in the car,"
Oh,
and
yeah.
so when you, like, start thinking back and, like, addressing those things where
That's
it's just like,
trauma.
okay, cool,"
Yeah.
like, these abandonment
Yep.
issues
Yep.
and all of these other and it's just like, you know, um, after I'd graduated college, like I had this like my ex and I, like we had this it was very messy. I like vented to my mom one day. She took everything way too personally and she like it fucked everything up and like ruined my mom and my relationship. Like it was mess, it was gnarly. And so that had never really like gotten addressed. And it's like my mom's thing is like, oh, we'll just sweep it under the rug and
Yeah.
like never talk about it
Yeah.
again.
Oh, yeah.
And so then it was like after we moved back, there was like "Oh, this isn't just like a one-time thing." So I was like, "Oh, maybe it was just like the election and like menopause and like whatever." I was making all these excuses for her,
Yeah.
and then it's like, "Oh no, this is a repeat of behavior."
Yeah, yeah.
And we thankfully, after I like talked to my therapist, it's like I did actually have a conversation with my mom recently, and like did get an apology that I did need,
Oh,
which
wow.
was really good.
That's
So that
great.
that was
That's
huge.
great. That's great.
Um, but just like the people pleasing that I got from her, because she's very much like the kind of person where it's just like everybody else's needs comes first, and she'll like suppress
Yes.
everything, and then till the point where it's just, and I'm very much not nearly as bad, and
I think
I'm
that's common, women of that generation.
oh, for
For
sure.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
And but just for me being able to like emotionally regulate and start learning how to like take care of myself before I burn out and everything goes to shit and it's
Yeah.
on fire, because it's like I'll just be like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'll do it, I'll do it. I don't need to ask for help, or it's like
Yeah.
whatever, until the point where I'm just like, I'm so resentful and I hate everything and I'm just miserable all the time until the point where I snap.
And that was me. Like, I snapped back in August, and I just was like, it was a big wake up call. And I think you brought up a valid point of we look at trauma has for us means extreme moments, but
Right.
that's not necessarily always trauma, right?
For sure.
And so I think a lot, like you said, you feel like, and that's common for academics because you feel like I've been so blessed, I have went to grad school, I've gotten this PhD, I'm able to live this life, I've traveled to all these places. I have nothing to complain about. There's
Right.
people who are getting beaten, there's people who are starving, there's people, there's people who don't are homeless,
For
So
sure.
there's so you feel like I don't have anything to come, and people will actually say that. I remember having a conversation. This might have been when I finished my PhD at Michigan, and I was having a conversation with a friend that's not a friend anymore. And I was, talking about some of my struggles, and they were like, "Well, what do you have to complain about? You have a whole PhD from Michigan. What's your issue?"
Right.
And I'm like, "Well, what
Girl, I
is
just
that?"
told you.
Yeah, what
Like,
do you but then that reinforces to you like maybe they're right. Maybe I don't have anything to complain about. Maybe I am just being a complainer. So
right.
it definitely, trauma, when you really start to unpack it. So when you really start to think about it, it can come from so many different places. And I think for me, you know, parenthood parenthood makes you, take a really deep look at yourself. So for me, I'm really happy that you're in therapy. And for myself, I was like, I need like this intense therapy. So I just started going to trauma therapy to really unpack a lot of these things. Just to be like, I'm with you. 2023, really 2024 was a terrible year.
Right.
Worst year of my life by far. I mean, I feel bad even complaining about other
Right.
years. 2024 was so bad. So I feel like, in 2025, I want to live my best life, right? I want to be
For
authentic.
sure.
I want to, and I think you actually talking about was I was saying, I started to get into trauma therapy because I felt like there are things
In
that I
2025 and authenticity.
yeah,
Yeah.
in 2025 my goal is to just be truly authentic, and with that it's like there are certain what parenthood has made me realize is that there are certain characteristics that I have that are just not that are no longer going to work.
Oh, for sure.
And I think that's just the reality of the situation. It's like if I want to have 2023 or really 2024 was so bad that if I really want to have a good, like, you're always gonna have ups and downs, like, that's not going to change, but if I really wanna have a good, great, whatever, amazing year and feel really good about myself, there are certain things that I'm just not going to be able to do anymore, like,
For
certain
sure.
characteristic traits are just gonna have to die right now, and really, like you said, I think a lot of times we're at the surface, so we're just putting a Band-Aid on things, and we're thinking, "Oh, well, we've achieved all these things." And I've heard people say, well, there's nothing wrong with you. You've done all these things or you've been all these places. But my goal in 2025 is to get to the root
Sure.
of all of these things that I'm seeing. Like I said, when I had a breakdown in August, it was just awful. And I was like, like you said, who is this person?
Right.
Because this is not me. I don't know who this I'm looking in the mirror and I am not recognizing in
Oh,
any
that's so
way.
good. Oh my god, yeah, I've struggled with that so much because
Yeah.
it was like, you know, before we moved back to Ohio, um, I was just living this creative life that I
Mhm.
had been working towards for so long.
Yeah.
Like I was about a year and a half into not working in an office anymore. I had my one
Mhm.
apparel client, but it was like I had the flexibility where it's like I could just like knock a bunch of designs out in like a day or two and have the rest of the week
Yeah.
to do whatever I wanted, So it's like I'm riding my bike along the ocean and it's like I'm painting all the time and I'm like hanging out with mural friends and we're doing all these different things,
Mhm.
and
Living the life.
living the life.
The
And
dream.
it's just like you're in California, it's just like we live next to the ocean and it's just like it's beautiful outside every day and it's like never humid and shitty. And then it's like, coming back and it was just like, oh wow,
Right.
like everything is just like you go drink a beer and then it's really humid outside and then it's really cold outside
And gray.
and it's
Dark.
gloomy all the time.
Yes.
And, there's not street art everywhere and there's not art, we were doing all these like live art events and stuff.
Very,
And I'm
very
like,
different
very different. And I'm
culture,
like
yeah.
really fortunate. I've been talking to the people at Bada Bean in Italian Village. It's like I work there most days. It's
Mm.
right next to V's daycare. And
Yep.
I think they're gonna let me do some, like, really cool, like, art events this year.
Yeah.
I just kinda, like, started brainstorming with them on some stuff. But, trying to one of the big goals coming back and, like, I think finally being out of that newborn phase enough and, like, finally coming back to myself and, like, 2024, I finally, like, got my roots planted back in the city, and I finally started doing some, like, local projects, like, with,
Yeah.
like, local clients and stuff and, like, being a part of, like, here,
Yeah.
um, is to really start just living that creative, authentic authentic life again, and, like, part of what I wanted to do here was, like, in this post-COVID world, you know, and in the age of, like, the internet now, it's like you don't have to leave to make it, like and
Yes.
so
Yes. I see what you're saying,
we
yeah.
have the accessibility and we have the ability now to do anything from anywhere
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
encouraging people that it's like, you know, the Midwest and, like, here and, it's like people want cool shit to happen. They want
Yeah.
cool experiences and, like,
Yeah.
they want to, like, do these cool things and, trying to show people that you don't have to go to the coast to get inspired and do inspiring shit.
Yeah.
And, but again, it's like you can't pour from an empty cup.
Mm-mm.
And, it's like you have to have the bandwidth and the ability
Mhm.
to like put yourself out and have those conversations and like be able to interact with other people and like not be so burnt out that it's like just thinking about doing that is exhausting,
It is.
and it's like
And
when it
that's
should be inspiring,
yeah.
you know?
And you bring up a valid point. I have always been so inspired in my position. I love being academic. I love students. Students are hilarious. They're funny. They're they're just amazing. They bring you so much joy. And, in 2024, when I was really struggling postpartum, I think that I lost all inspiration in my position. I didn't submit really any proposals in 2020. I submitted one in November. I didn't submit any single PI proposals. And it really was because I just was completely uninspired.
Right,
I have never in my life had writer's block. I had so much writer's block in 2024. Like I could not I remember trying to sit down and write a proposal and I was like, this is some of the worst writing that I've
right,
ever done in my life. This is not who I am. That's what I said, like looking in the mirror and being like, who is this woman? Who is this, person? This is not me. This is not what I do. I'm good at what I do. And
right.
right now I'm sucking at what I do. And I think, in 2025, as we were saying, truly being authentic, which is why I started. I'm like, I've always wanted to start a YouTube channel. I've had my blog for so long, since 2019, where I've talked about, balancing academia with so many different things or, being a grad student. Like, why a friend of my line sister, Margot, was like, Ariel, you should start a YouTube channel. Like,
Right,
you be perfect for like you love giving out information. It's just like what you're really good at. I'm like, you're right. That is what I'm
right.
good at. So, really doing things that I feel really good about. But one thing I think I'm learning is doing them because I want to do
Oh,
them
for
and
sure.
not because I feel like I
Have
have to
to.
do them
Yeah,
because I need to keep up a perfectionist, this thing that I'm a perfectionist or please somebody just because I truly want to do it, right? Not
For
that I feel
sure.
like I have to do it because it checks. For me, I am a box checker, right? I'm gonna get this award check, I'm gonna do this check. And now I'm like, I don't care about the checks. I know I'm really
Fuck the
good.
checks.
That's real. Should not have chosen academia though. Make any money. Should have went to industry. Just
Right.
joking. But it's academia has a lot of other pluses.
For
But
sure.
I think for me it's just more about truly doing in 2025, letting go of perfectionism and truly doing things because I want to do them and because they bring me joy and bring me peace. And I just think I have a lot of hope
For sure.
for this year and a positive outlook on this year because I mean, it can't get any worse than 2024.
Right. And something I was like thinking about this earlier. There's this quote from a song that I really like that's actually just a weird rendition of a poem. But there's this line. It's perfectionism may look good in his shiny shoes, but he's a little bit of an asshole and nobody will invite him to their pool parties.
It's probably me.
And I just like it's just so funny. And I think it's like really kind of like accurate because it's like it just doesn't really serve you,
Mm-mm.
and it really just kind of like he's a little bit of an asshole. It's just like it makes
Yeah,
you hard on
it is.
yourself, and it's just
SEIs.
like and, but no, and it's like doing things for the sake of, like, wanting to do them and, like, coming back to, like, the authenticity and, like, I've really been trying to actually start writing more myself. It's something that I've like wanted to start doing, and like Amina's been on me forever about like sharing more authentically
Yeah.
and like for years at this point. And it's like she's been telling me to like, share more on video and I've done a lot of like time lapse videos and like whatever, but like lately like really trying to start writing and like doing these voiceovers and like sharing these thoughts about these things.
Yeah.
And but and so an exercise that I've always enjoyed, but I really didn't do at all in 2024, was I do these sketchbook freestyles, is what I like to call them.
Mm.
And so you can really apply it to any kind of like whether it's writing or whatever, But what I like to do is, for me, I work with Posca markers, which are basically just like acrylic paint
Mhm.
markers.
Yeah.
And so, like, what I've been doing is I've been starting my day. Usually, after I drop V off, I'm at the coffee shop. I'm getting ready to start my work day, and I usually set aside like 30 to 45 minutes, and I'll just create something. And it's like I don't use pencils or erasers or anything, and it's just this way of like intuitively trusting myself and like also letting go and also just like letting whatever it is come
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
and like wanting to have this finished piece of art within a time limit, and so it's just like you still got to get to work at some point,
Yeah.
and it's a lot easier to do it in the morning than after you've been working all day and
You're
then you pick your
drained.
kid up
Yeah.
and she's hungry and she's screaming at you and she's throwing a shit fit because you're not giving her mac and cheese for the fifth day in a row and not letting her have the
Love mac
third
and
apple
cheese.
juice and watch Dino Ranch, you know, and so, but for me, it's been this really good exercise just because I was in this loop of this survival loop last year where it was just like everything that I created was for somebody else.
Yeah.
Like I didn't create any
Yes.
personal work. I haven't made any art for myself in so long. I haven't like been like painting. I haven't been drawing. I haven't been journaling. I haven't been doing my sketchbooks because it's like I used to come home and I would like work on my sketchbook for hours. And it's like I found my box in the house the other day from when we moved, and it's like I was flipping through, and it's like I've got just like this huge box of just sketchbooks that are completely full, and it's really inspiring to look back and just seeing that like raw element to it.
Yeah.
And and they're messy, and like some are as I've gotten older and like they get more refined and everything else, but it's like with that too it's just like you're holding on to too much, and it's
Yeah.
like and you're not like I haven't like let loose in so long, and I haven't had fun
Yeah.
in, like I think it was the year that V was born. It was a couple months beforehand. It's like I had, he was like I hadn't gotten diagnosed officially with ADHD yet. I was having a really hard time, getting in to see a doctor that would, like, do it, all of these, like, mental health places through insurance were just like, "Oh, well, it's like if you're over 18, we don't take you. If you are over 18, it's like a 9-month waiting period, and you gotta
Yep.
fill out, like, 400 pages of paperwork and all
Yeah.
this different
It's a
stuff."
lot. Yeah.
And somebody was fine, and so I found this one guy. He was like a retired ADHD therapist, but he was like an ADHD like coach now.
Interesting.
and he was fine, and but his whole thing was just like, you know, you're a Ferrari stuck in a rut and
Mm,
you're trying to do all these things at the same time and like you're just spinning your wheels and you're not having any fun. And he
yeah,
was just like, he just sounds like everything would be fixed if you could just like find a way to like start having fun
start
again. And
again,
it's like,
yeah.
how the fuck do you have fun when you've got a newborn that's screaming all the time and everybody's, at their last,
Everybody
they're at
needs
their wits
you.
end.
Everyone
Yeah.
needs you.
It's like there is no time, there is no space to have fun, and that was like one of the biggest things to like grapple with of like, going into turning 30, which was right after V was born, and I was teaching this self promo class. I'm just like, okay, cool. It's like I'm finally where I've been working so hard to get to for so long, and I'm fucking miserable. Like,
Yeah,
this
it
sucks.
sucks,
Like,
yeah.
this is not like, what do I do now? And you're standing on the edge of just like, okay, cool. It's like I've checked all my boxes and, you know, but I'm so unhappy,
Yeah,
you
so
know?
unhappy, and I don't think
And
people understand the magnitude of that unhappiness. I think people pass it off, "Oh, you're just a new parent." But everyone's journey in parenthood is so different. And a lot of people will, but they don't truly understand like the weight, like the mental weight that you're carrying from the unhappiness because all they see is that you're checking boxes. And that seems to be as Americans, that is how we just
right.
sadly how we define our success.
And, I think it's interesting too, just because it's like, I think part of the issue can also come with, for me, like I always wanted to have a kid and, two, if everything was in the right, if everything aligned properly,
Mhm.
it's cool. But, one for sure, but it was never like the priority,
Same for me.
and
Yeah,
so
same
for
for
me, and it
me.
was like culturally for me, like for my parents and like the way I was raised, it was just like, you know, obviously it's like we'd love to have a grandkid, like you'd be a
There was
great
no pressure
dad,
for
but it
me.
wasn't just
No,
like
I
the
agree.
purpose of your life is to have a baby,
That has never
you
been my
know,
parents.
and so, which was a we it's a different story for my wife,
Yeah.
um,
Similar, I'm with
and
you, or I think
it's a very cultural
I don't
yeah,
even
so
think my mom or dad would have batted an eye if I never had a child. I
I
don't think they would've. I have an older brother, he has kids.
yeah,
I don't think they would've in any way, shape, or form. I have a lot of cousins that have kids. No one would've said anything. Even my grandparents aren't like that.
we
I don't have that
we
pressure.
joked forever because I was the oldest grandson on or the oldest grandkid on my mom's side of of my grandma's lineage, and, we joked for a long time that it's like she was just because she died last 2 years 2023, she was, like, 95. She had a good life,
Oh, yeah, same. My
and,
grandma's same. Yeah.
and it was just kinda funny, like, the joke for a long time was just, like, she's holding out until I had a kid, and then after I had a kid, she could be like, "Alright, like,
I'm
deuces, like,
outta
I'm
here.
cool, I
Yeah.
can flex my great grandbaby, I did my job," and that's exactly what happened, like,
Yeah.
and I was really honestly, like, really fortunate and, like, really happy that, like, we were able to do that,
Mm, me too.
just because it was, like, by the end of her life, it's like her memory was declining,
Right.
overall, like, went out best case scenario, just kinda, like, fell
Yeah.
asleep, and it was a beautiful, just, like, quiet ending, didn't have, like, some
Yeah,
traumatic incident,
traumatic. Same for my grandma
which
when
was
she
great,
passed, yeah.
but it was awesome because, she was getting to the point where whatever, but, like, she always recognized V, and, like, she wasn't,
Oh,
like she didn't get lit up by too many things anymore, but we
yeah.
have a few pictures of, like, them together where it's just, like, she is beaming,
That's so
you know?
sweet.
And so that was really, really special,
Yeah.
and
I think
important.
too, like, when we have similar backgrounds where, like, for my family, it was always really to be I mean, I always say I was raised to be career driven. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just the reality of the situation. Um, so I think and that is a kind of a part of not kind of it's a part of this kind of perfectionist attitude that I have because you do feel the pressure of that, right? That the expectation for you is like very different than the expectation of the people around you. Like the expectation for you is exactly what you're doing now, right? And you're going to do that and you're going to do more. And when you feel like you're not meeting those expectations, then you just feel it just makes you feel terrible. So I mean, there are plenty of people who experience, similar challenges that you and I have faced. Like, what are some tips that you have for parents that are, playing the balancing act, like between their ambition and their career and parenthood?
I think the biggest thing is really just like learning how, and this is really hard, but like to give yourself the grace and the space to just like, you just have to figure it out, which is an unfortunate part, you know?
Yeah.
But learning how to ask for help, learning how
Yes.
to let go, because it's just like, you know, I'm very much not a type A personality. It's just like, I'm very much just like, we're going to figure it out as we go. It's like, I didn't read a baby book, I'm just
Yeah.
like,
I'm so type A.
and so for me, it was just like, it was kind of just like I work better where I'm just like, when a situation arises, it's like, okay, I'm gonna look up how to like deal with this,
Mm,
versus like I'm gonna read everything I possibly can beforehand to
right. That's me.
prepare for any
Hmm.
situation, because it's like I just don't have the bandwidth to deal with that. I'm just like, it's gonna overload my brain. Also, I just like I don't read well anymore. I just like I tune out. Like I'm just like, we'll just figure it
It's
out.
because of
We're
how
doing it live,
we talk about
and
this with students. How we receive information is so different than,
for sure.
yes, video,
And
social media.
that's a whole other,
Yeah, YouTube.
um,
Yeah.
but I think again, like we've kind of mentioned earlier on, is just like, A, you don't have to do it all right now.
Yep.
Like keeping this list, and it's just like being able again to like plant those seeds and to visualize these things. And as long as it's cemented in your subconscious, and it's
Yeah.
like, and you've got, it's like nobody's going to take that away from you. And it's like, especially if you're at a place where we are in our career, it's just like nobody's going to take that away from us either.
No.
Like nobody's going to take away all of your knowledge and all of your reward, or awards, not rewards, rewards too, I guess.
Yeah.
But you know and it's like nobody can take away your accolades and like what you've learned and what you've done. And it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's ultimately, it's just like, as long as like you are, I don't wanna say, like, doing the bare minimum, because it's like that's, like, the literally the hardest thing that you can possibly hear for someone like us, but it's just like,
I don't know. People
learn
think that's helpful.
but there is the point of, there's, like, the adage or whatever where it's just like 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, and it's really hard to accept that sometimes, because it's like when I was in school especially, it's like I would just try to go so above and beyond on all these projects,
Yeah.
and it was like there's a semester I was taking 5 studios, and that's like a big, like, you don't do that. That's like straight, like, send yourself to the psych ward. Just
Okay.
don't do that. It's like, um, and thankfully, like, one of my professors for that, he was like at the end of his life. We didn't know at the time, but like he had some like pretty gnarly cancer, and he was also about to retire. Like he'd
Okay.
been there forever,
Oh wow.
and like he had historically been one of the professors. Like he was in Vietnam, jumping out of helicopter. Like he was Mister Hardcore, old school, like
Okay.
badass, like
You need those
and
professors.
he was like one of the guys like back in the day where it was just like in like the old art school days when it was like very fucking different. Like,
Yeah.
back in the day where it's like, oh, they'll, like, put a cigarette out in your, like, painting and tell you fucking suck and you need to, like, jump off a bridge type
Mm,
deal.
yeah.
But it's like when I had him for this class, he was at the point where he's like, "I literally, like, do not care what you do." And it was like, if you showed up with anything, you would get an A. And
Interesting.
so for me, like, that was a lifesaver for that semester. And I feel bad because I wish I would have gotten more out of that class, but it was also just like I did not have the capacity
Yeah,
to do it.
you're on a robot.
And yeah, 100%. But that wasn't really a good example. But, but no, like, I think there is a level of just, like, like, showing up, and the consistency is more important than perfectionism.
Yeah.
Like, being able to show up at 25, 35% versus trying to show up every day at 100 is so much more sustainable. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're still going to get the results. And it's like, for someone like us where it's, this is the this is the end game. Like, there isn't another option, where it's just like, you know those a lot of these deadlines that we set for ourselves are arbitrary, and
Yeah.
it's ego driven. It's really just us trying to flex on people and flex on ourselves and just be like,
Oh
we're
yeah, I'm
fucking
always
awesome.
trying to back in the day, when people say do you compete? Well, actually I don't compete with other people. I would say I really was competing with myself. Can I outdo what I did the year before?
for
which
sure.
is crazy.
And but there is a it's like
Crazy.
that's part of, like, leveling up,
Yeah.
and getting
Yeah.
to the next level because it's like you don't wanna stay stagnant, like, you don't wanna
Yeah.
stay where you are because then you just lose
Yeah.
yourself in that too, and, like, I had a design professor, like, freshman year at CCAD where it's like I had said something about it's like, it is a competition, and there is a level of just, like, you d especially early on where it's like
Yeah.
when you're learning and you're cutting your teeth and it's like it's a competitive industry, and also just, like, there is a level of, like, you do need to compete in order to, like, be good enough to have the ability, like, to get the jobs
Yeah,
and
with the
to, like,
healthy
stay like
competition.
healthy competition, exactly,
Mhm.
and so it's like but and then, getting to a point where it's like going from competing against others to competing against yourself and then learning to lift others up.
Yeah.
And, it's like where I'm at now is like I want to start helping. And it's something I've been wanting to do for a while, but like finally having the bandwidth now this year to try to do that is like helping younger creatives and people like trying to live a more creative life, like connect the dots and get out of their own way and like again, like how do you reverse engineer your dreams kind
Yeah,
of is like a
yeah.
way that I like to talk about it, and that can be a whole other thing.
But I think one part of it really is as your kids, months will be 2 in February. As they get older, they get easier in a lot of ways and they get harder in some, but they do
Sure.
get easier. And so, in the early stages, especially like the first year, the schedule, everything's just chaotic and you feel I know for me, I felt very out of control. The best way I can
Oh,
describe
for
it is
sure.
like everything felt out of control. My emotions, my mental stability, my job, everything, the way I was
So volatile.
yeah, the way I was interacting with my students felt out of control, and I'm pretty sure they probably felt it too, right? Like my research group, that things were a little different. But I think when you really stop and you think about it, it's like, what is are these expectations that I'm putting on myself? Are they healthy? And when you need to be able to recognize when they get unhealthy. And because it does affect your parenting,
Oh, for
it
sure.
can affect your parenting because you're irritable.
Oh, for
You're
sure.
extremely irritable and frustrated. I remember I got something called mother's thumb, which is very common for moms. And like Monsa was wiggling, and I was like, my hand is killing me. And my husband was like, he was on the phone. He was like, Ariel, you need to calm down. And I'm like, and I realized like I'm getting so irritable over little
Oh, for
things, right?
sure.
Like I'm getting so irritable. So I do think, like I said, as your kids get older, they get easier in ways. They get harder in some, but they do get easier. And you start to, and also as they get older, you start to get your footing.
For sure.
You start to find like some balance, right? You say like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know how this goes. I know how this is supposed to work. We have a routine and it helps you. And I think, you brought up a valid point earlier when you were like, it's going to work out, right? Eventually, this is all going to work out and you're going to get to a point. But I think one tip I have for people is the minute you feel not 7 months afterwards, not 8 months afterward, but the minute that you feel that it is not right, whatever that not right is for you, I can't define it for
Right.
everyone. The minute you feel unlike yourself, the minute you start to feel like I'm not recognizing who this person is, that's the minute that you need to get help.
Oh, for sure. And I think it is easier said than done, which is the unfortunate part.
Right. It
And,
is.
and it can be really hard to be able to even identify that. And like we could probably talk about that forever too. And I know we're almost out of time, but I think that is a really good point. And like to especially like for new parents to find whatever support that they can get and find ways to fill their own cup.
Yeah.
It's like again, like you know, I've said it multiple times at this point, but it's like it's something like I've really been trying to like unlearn is just like you have to be able to take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's that's hard,
Yeah.
Um, but it does get easier. You hate hearing it at the time,
You
it's
do.
the
Oh,
word
that's why I never say it. I
and it's
never
just
say it
like,
to people.
bro, just let me be
Yeah, it's gonna get
angry. Like
easier. I'm with you.
it's not
It
easy
feels
right now.
dismissive.
It does. And
It
it's just
feels
like even if
dismissive.
it's true, it's
Yeah.
just like no, this sucks so bad.
Right now.
Like literally we're just, like, snapping at each other all the time, we're getting screamed at, we're getting shit on, we're getting, like nobody's having a good time,
Nobody's having a
and,
good time.
you know,
And you
little kids
don't
are cool.
They
You
are,
know,
they bring
and they're great.
you a lot of joy, right? And
Um,
that's but it goes back to what we were saying earlier of like if you complain, then people automatically feel like, "Oh, you
you
don't
don't
love your
get it,
kid."
you don't yeah, you don't love it, and it's like, "No,
It's
I
like, "I
love my kid,"
love
and it
my
was like
kid. What are you talking
the
about?"
thing that I really that was, like, such a big change for me was, like, once it was, like spring was, like, finally coming out,
Mm,
V was, like, finally old enough to be out of, like, the bassinet stroller
yes.
attachment, and she was in the, like, the
Finally.
sit-up regular
Yeah.
stroller, and, we were out walking, and the flowers were starting to bloom, this when we were on the South Side, and, it was awesome because it's like we would just she's, like, finally processing things,
Yeah,
she's, like,
yeah,
conscious, she's
it's
not just, like, a
there's a ch
shitting
yep.
vegetable anymore, and it's like, I don't hate saying because I think it's hilarious and it sounds funny and visually it's funny, but it's like,
They're
it's
not that
true, like,
fun,
they're
yeah.
like
At the
and
beginning,
they're
they're
yeah,
not that fun.
they're not,
They're cute to look at.
and yeah, sometimes, and now that they are, but no, like, we were on our walk and, like, the flowers are starting to bloom, and it would be so cool because 'cause I'd be like I'd pick these flowers and I'd show her, and she'd be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, whoa," and it's like she's consciously, like, processing things
Yeah.
now,
Yeah, it's different,
and
there's a
it's like the
shift.
weather's finally nice, like, we can go for these walks, and it's like when we were in
Mhm.
Long Beach, it's like when I first moved out there, it's like I'd be going for, like, multi-mile walks and,
Yeah.
like, taking pictures of it because, like, the flora, everything's so different,
I was thinking to myself, my husband so before when I was living in DC, my husband lived in San Diego, and he was in San Diego when the pandemic happened, so I, like, packed up I still had the old school trash can Mac, I, like, packed it up,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah, man, they need to bring that back. Packed it up, went to San Diego, and I don't like many US cities, but I love San
Yeah.
Diego, and I'm always like, "Man, I could live anywhere right now, it would be San Diego, but I love OSU, so OSU
Yeah.
would have to move to San Diego too."
Right. For sure.
And I don't think that's happening ever, so
Yeah,
I'm
they'd
inclined.
have a lot to move.
Yeah, they have a ton to
Yeah.
move, so I'm like, "Yeah, I love OSU." I like San Diego, but I do
Right.
love OSU, so I think though that, our time is up, but I do think we've really touched on some important things, and I think, if I had to just some key takeaways from our conversation, I think a lot of it is just about kinda trusting the process, right?
Oh,
That
for
you I
sure.
loved how you started off with, planting these seeds and kind of watching and everything doesn't harvest at the same time, right? And I
Right.
think that takes a level of maturity to get there to that point.
And one other, like, little thing, because I had a note about this before, and this is something I've, like, really thought a lot about too, is, like, you know, part of that, just, like, another kind of, like, analogy is just, like, the snowball effect of it too. And,
Mm,
you have to do a lot of different things, and you have to again, it's like you have to plant all these seeds. It's like laying the breadcrumbs, and it's
yeah,
like and, especially early on in the career, it's like you have all of these huge dreams. You wanna do all these different things, but you can't do all of them all the time, and you can't do them all at once,
yeah,
and ultimately, like, you can't master everything.
yeah, that's
And
true,
and
that's
so
true.
it's like, as you progress and as you I think, like, early on, it's like because everybody talks about you have to niche down, you have to do this, you have to do that, and it's like, that happens naturally over time as you've tried and failed at a bunch of other things.
Yeah,
And so, like, for me, it was, like, one of the big things that I, like, really wanted to do after I took this, like, motion graphics class in college was, like, I really wanted to animate a music video, and my wife can, like it was oh my god, it was a horrible experience. I was so stoked. I finally had this opportunity, and, like, it was just, like it was a miserable process, and
yeah,
I finally just, like, wiped my hands of it, like, 3 quarters of the way through, and I'm like, "Dude, I can't finish this, like, it's a nightmare, you're gonna have to, like, have somebody else do it," and I was like, "I'm never doing animation for anyone ever again."
yeah, I can
And
see that being hard.
so but with that, it's like I can literally track my entire career back to a single poster that created the snowball that rolled into where I am now
Yeah,
over the
yeah,
course of, like, 5, 6 years,
yeah.
but we're not gonna go into that today because it's a whole other story.
Well, thank you so much for being on Dr. Professor Mom, and thank you for everyone tuning in and watching. This has been a great conversation.